On April 26, 1986, reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant shattered. A massive steam explosion tore through the biological shield and launched the 1,000-ton concrete roof through the top of the building, exposing a burning radioactive core to the open sky. Public accounts of the disaster frequently settle on a simple explanation. The night shift made a series of colossal mistakes. By focusing the blame on a few frontline operators, the event is safely contained within a narrative of individual incompetence. The crew was attempting a turbine rundown simulation, designed to see how long spinning turbines could power coolant pumps during a blackout. However, the test had been delayed 10 hours by grid dispatchers, forcing an undertrained night shift to execute a complex procedure under intense time pressure. Large-scale industrial failures do not materialize from isolated errors. They are the cumulative result of a process where minor deviations from safety standards are slowly accepted as routine operational norms. Stopping an investigation at the level of worker error is a dangerous trap for any safety professional. It offers an easy scapegoat while leaving the latent, systemic threats that actually triggered the event completely untouched. Forensic investigators use the Human Factors Analysis and Classification System, or AFAX, to map these failures. Based on the research of James Reason, AFAX provides a structured way to trace an accident from the physical event back to its organizational origins. At the system's sharp end are active failures, the immediate unsafe acts by people operating the equipment. Tracing the model back left reveals latent failures. These hidden pathogens, created by high-level decision-makers, lie dormant in the system's design and culture for years. In this model, an organization's defenses are like slices of Swiss cheese. Catastrophe occurs only when the holes in these layers, representing flaws in training, design, or culture, shift and align, allowing a hazard to pass straight through every barrier. Chernobyl was the inevitable result of a defense-in-depth architecture that had been hollowed out from the inside, leaving the system vulnerable to the slightest operational trigger. By treating the control room as a forensic crime scene, we can work backward from the moment of the explosion to separate the visible symptoms from the actual root causes. Hours before the disaster, the operators manually disabled the Emergency Core Cooling System, or ECCS. This system was designed to automatically flood the reactor with water during a crisis, but the crew shut it down to prevent it from interfering with the turbine test. Moments before the final excursion, the operators pressed the AZ-5 button. Intended as a rapid emergency shutdown, this command was the final physical action taken before the reactor's power levels surged beyond the point of no return. These actions raise a critical question. Why would experienced nuclear engineers disable their own safety systems and then execute a shutdown command that destroyed their reactor? Examining these button presses in isolation is insufficient. They were not independent choices, but actions dictated by the specific environment and the intense pressures placed upon the crew. The crew bypassed safety systems because they were operating under the normalization of deviance. This is the process where violating a protocol, like disabling the ECCS, becomes a routine practice because previous violations did not result in an immediate accident. Moving to the supervision layer, the evidence points toward a total breakdown in the control room's psychological safety. The deputy chief engineer supervising the test had explicitly threatened to fire any worker who refused to proceed. This extreme authority gradient silenced the operators and forced them to continue the test despite the reactor's increasing instability. This management style paralyzed the crew's ability to exercise stop-work authority. In a culture built on fear and strict compliance, the right to halt an unsafe task existed only on paper. Below supervision are the preconditions for unsafe acts, specifically the immense cognitive load created by a poorly designed human-machine interface. The RBMK control system failed to provide clear, real-time alerts for the operational reactivity margin, or ORM. The ORM is a critical safety parameter that measures how many control rods are currently positioned to maintain stable power levels. Fatigued and operating in the middle of the night, the crew was forced to manually interpret ambiguous data to guess the state of the reactor. They were effectively flying blind. When an organization prioritizes production timelines over psychological safety, it constructs the exact preconditions required for human error to become inevitable. This leads to the deepest layer of the investigation, the latent organizational pathogens buried within the design of the Soviet nuclear enterprise. The RBMK possessed a fatal flaw, the positive void coefficient. When cooling water boils into steam voids, power rapidly accelerates. A secondary flaw existed in the control rods. Their graphite tips caused a massive power spike at the moment of entry, during a shutdown. These counterintuitive design characteristics were classified state secrets, meaning the operators running the test were never trained on how to manage them. The INSAG 7 report concluded that a deficient safety culture permeated the entirety of the system, from the initial design and engineering to the final regulatory oversight. This pathology was fueled by structural secrecy and a relentless drive to meet bureaucratic production quotas. Technical failures in previous tests were suppressed rather than analyzed and corrected. A rigid top-down hierarchy successfully prevented any independent safety verification or peer challenge that might have identified these design flaws before the April 26 test. A pathological culture had systematically dismantled every defense-in-depth barrier long before the night shift arrived. The final button press merely closed the circuit on a catastrophe that was already inevitable. The autopsy of Chernobyl serves as a direct challenge for modern safety leaders to identify these same dormant pathogens within their own facilities. Frameworks like OSHA's Process Safety Management Standard, or PSM, and ISO 45001 were developed specifically to build the structural defenses that the Soviet system lacked. A key lesson for any HSE officer is that stop work authority must be a culturally rewarded reflex. Workers must feel psychologically safe to halt an operation the moment a safety boundary is crossed. Standard operating procedures are life-critical engineering controls. They are not optional guidelines that can be bypassed to maintain a production schedule. High-risk abnormal operations require a formal management of change, or MOC. This protocol ensures that any deviation from steady-state operation is reviewed by an independent party to identify hidden risks before the task begins. Training must go beyond steady-state operations. Operators must be prepared to recognize and manage abnormal, degraded conditions where the system no longer behaves intuitively. Decision thresholds should be explicitly formalized. If a specific parameter is breached, the process stops. This removes the ambiguity of human judgment from high-pressure situations. A mature safety culture treats the absence of an accident as a dynamic state that requires constant energy to maintain, rather than as evidence that the system is safe. This is the primary responsibility of the modern safety leader. You are the final check against the slow, invisible erosion of your organization's defenses. The boiling frog effect is a constant threat. Minor daily compromises to protocols are a leading indicator that your system is moving toward a failure point. A system that makes catastrophic decisions feel normal will eventually override even the most skilled individual's defenses. Use these frameworks to audit your facility and defend your barrier stacks. To continue your education in safety leadership, subscribe to HSE Study for further professional insights.